This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
The other night I had dinner at my aunt and uncle's house. I was traveling from Maine to New York, and my mother and I stopped overnight in Massachusetts. And one of the things I love about getting together with my family is often a dinner around a dinner table is involved, and this night was no exception. Sitting around the table were representatives of 4 generations, 1 traditionalist, aka the silent generation, 2 baby boomers, 2 Gen Xers, and 2 Gen Zers. Glaringly missing was a millennial, but I was informed the next day when I told my daughter about it that she would be more than happy to represent her generation at a future family dinner. Duly noted, honey. You will be invited next time. Many aspects of this gathering fascinated me. The one that stood out, though, more than others is how all of us at that table, with our range of ages from 7 to 83, how all of us are now operating not just in the natural world, which is governed by its own set of laws we can't dispute, but also we are operating in a world ruled by technology, specifically the internet, which doesn't yet have a collective set of laws everyone A, knows, B, understands, and C, well, we aren't even at C yet. Gravity is gravity in the natural world, after all, but not on the internet. So goes the internet, so goes our lives, regardless of what year you were born. Everyone alive today is influenced by this thing that no one can see, but that dominates many aspects of our lives. Whether we want to be operating in a world ruled by the internet or not has no bearing. It's a fact. And some of us at that table that night remember life before the internet. Some of you listening, I imagine many of you listening, can remember life before the internet. My cousin's kids, however, who are 11 and 7 respectively, do not. They will be the first generation to grow up truly diginative. And I think diginative is a term. Let me know if there's a better term, meaning people who only know life with the internet in it, fully immersed from day one. Now, neither of these kids have iPhones yet. Their parents have decided not until they're older, but they've seen YouTube, they know about Instagram and Facebook and all these other apps. They use laptops, computers, and tablets every day at school, and they're going online at school. Essentially, they know about all of the internet's shiny, magical portals, taking you to wherever, whenever, and with whomever you want. But, and this is a big one, they are being taught by non-digi-natives, people who remember life before. So many young women, for example, are surgically altering their face so they look like a Snapchat filter or one of the Kardashians. This is a real thing. They also remember life before our phone has more value with a state-of-the-art camera on it than its ability to call and talk to someone. No matter how hard parents may try to either shield their children from the internet until a certain age, or the opposite, give them free rein, as the case may be, because their thinking goes, they might as well learn it now. No matter which side of this spectrum a person falls on, it's impossible not to acknowledge one very important variable in this entire internet equation. That variable is there is no universal manual. Not for 83-year-olds, not for 46-year-olds, certainly not for 11-year-olds. In many ways, we are still making this up as we go along. Do you remember the first time you sat down to use the internet? I do. I was teaching high school English at the time. It was the mid 1990s, and I already knew my students knew more about this wild thing than I or any of my colleagues did because I'd seen groups of them gathered around clunky laptops, sitting on the floor, gawking at their screens. A palpable buzz filled the air. We all knew things were going to be different from now on. We just didn't know how different things would be. What didn't happen that day, I sat down for the first time and got on the internet, was I did not get a pamphlet, a playbook, or a sheet of paper with stick figure drawings on it walking me through how this thing works. It came with no operating instructions, and it still doesn't. Not in any organized way, anyway. As such, there is no turning to page 17, section C, subpoint 4.9, that instructs us what to do when we accidentally stumble onto a site with images we now can't unsee. There is no index guiding us toward the chapter on how not to get sucked into the death scroll on social media to the point where despair fills every cell in our body. And no, here's how to think about this place you are about to enter, and you have no idea where you're going to end up. And oh, just so you know, there are no rules and no one seems to know what they're doing here. But hey, it's new and it's cool and everyone's doing it, so just go for it, right? There's none of that. Every one of us has had to figure it out on our own to one degree or another. And sometimes it's worked out, and it also hasn't always gone smoothly. Of course, these days, plenty of books are available about how to use the internet, including Internet for Dummies. Of course, the Dummies franchise has gotten in on that. And for digi-natives like my cousin's children, just Google it is the default response to any question we have about anything. The body of research continues to grow about the many ways constant exposure to information via the internet is affecting us humans. You've heard me here on this podcast over the years have numerous conversations with different guests about this very thing, specifically how the never-ending barrage of stuff coming at us from all directions affects our ability to think, to feel, and to act ethically, responsibly, and humanely towards ourselves and towards others. In his book, Silicon Snake Oil, Second Thoughts on the Information Highway, author Clifford Stoll writes, quote, "The brave new world of cyber glop will be an increasingly lonely, isolated, and dehumanized world. It will be a place where you can order anything you want online, but you don't know your neighbors, or where your children and your parents will spend evening hours logged into the net, talking to distant strangers rather than each other." At first glance, you might think Stoll wrote those words yesterday, not in 1996, nearly 30 years ago when his book was published. Even now, 26 years after the fact, his predictions are chillingly on point. When I read that, I felt the hair on the back of my neck go up. I thought, wow, how prescient was this man? And he was part of the crew that helped bring the internet to light. And it's often interesting how inventors, once something they've created is out in the world and out of their hands, depending on what happens, they can then become the biggest critics of the thing they helped invent. That's one of the takeaways from the book Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, the rest of his book may be obsolete today, right? It's a tech book, and that is the fate of many tech books. They're relevant for, these days, it feels like 5 seconds before they're obsolete. But this particular observation that he made about the internet fostering loneliness, isolation, and dehumanization has indeed become our reality, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. And this gives rise to some questions for leadership. Information goes only so far. Without a broader context, without conversation and connection and perspective, the information we find can influence our thinking in numerous ways, and many of them are faulty, right? Because it becomes an echo chamber. And until we have other minds to bounce these ideas off of and to get some sense of the bigger picture of information, it can breed all kinds of stuff. What did we see happen during the pandemic? The rise of fake news, the proliferation of misinformation. And it continues today. We're just not as focused on it as we once were. And in some ways, a lot of content outlets that people turn to for information have started to put into place policies and statements around the neutrality of their reporting, because they want people to trust their reporting. They want people to trust their site and not feel like it's heavily biased one way or another, or that it's just spewing a bunch of misinformation. All right. Now, one of the things I think is interesting, I can find fantastic recipes for bread online, but what I won't find is anything about that instant when I will know I've kneaded the bread long enough. That's a contextual kind of thing. That's an IRL, in real life kind of thing. Getting driving directions online is great until I realize that construction or an accident is blocking my intended route, and I can't figure out how to get around it because I don't have an actual paper map. Kids learning how to use computers is great. I'm all for this, 100%. But when they can't do basic arithmetic or talk in complete sentences while looking someone in the eye, how can we justify the way monies are allocated in education these days? What kind of world do we want to build? Now, listen, I am not anti-internet, far from it. The internet has added more to my life than taken away. Being a podcaster is dependent upon the internet, and I'm grateful for the opportunities the internet has given me. However, I think we can agree that the internet can't be left to its own devices. It shouldn't be locked down or controlled by a singular governing body. I completely, rally against that. But at the same time, it also shouldn't be a free-for-all without consequences or accountability, right? The buck has to stop somewhere, that proverbial saying. Like all us mere mortals, clear boundaries and self-discipline need to be in place. And this is an enormous task, one people far smarter than I work on every day, and I'm grateful for them too. Regardless of what field or industry you may be in, an important question leaders must ask today is this: how do we develop the capacity for living simultaneously in two worlds? Certainly, there's the natural world into which we were born, where universal laws rule the roost. And then there's this relatively new thing known as the virtual world, where seemingly anything goes. How do we do this so that our lives are rich, they're healthy, and satisfying without destroying the planet or each other? So we're meeting at the intersection. At the intersection of these two worlds is where we find ourselves right now. Taking the time to have meaningful conversations like the ones I have here on PYP. Conversations that inspire action toward this aim is imperative if we honestly want to make the world a better place while saving it from old models of thinking, those outdated paradigms that no longer serve us. The existence of this thing called the internet, let alone all the tools, all the apps, all the devices that have since been created so that we can use it, we can access it, we can make things with it. It's arguably the most significant advancement humans have made since discovering fire. The power it has had and continues to impart on advancing culture at a rapid and sometimes dangerous pace cannot be underestimated or taken for granted. We also can't turn a blind eye to it and act as if nothing's happening, because a lot is happening. The internet is a tremendous gift. It also presents an enormous leadership problem, one I'm confident we can solve if we take the time to put our minds to it, talk to one another, and take action accordingly. I'm committed to being a part of the solution. And I know it's not going to be easy because, like all growth, it's not going to happen overnight, nor will it always be smooth. But I really believe this, guys. We can find our way forward in ways that make an impact and a difference if we are willing to invest in those conversations. And I want to thank you for being a part of Team PYP, for listening to the conversations that I present to you each week, for letting me share my ideas and insights about how we can develop ourselves, our capacities for greater things. Because I do firmly believe that life only moves forward. It does not go backward. And so if you're with me on that, that's fantastic. I feel you with me on that. This is Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. Remember, team, it is always a great day to play your position. I can't wait to see you again very, very soon. In the meantime, make it a great day. That's it for now.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.